Good evening to all, and welcome to the Chatter After's official companion podcast to HBO's The Last of Us. As welcome and join us as we chat and seek the art beyond the clickers. I am Brandon, and of course, I'm accompanied by my better half of the Chatter After crew, Mike. What's up, dude?
It's been a minute since I've been on this show, so I'm happy to be back talking The Last of Us. It's big shoes to fill with Brett not being here, but I'm gonna do my
Yeah.
best.
Yeah, if anybody follows Brett on Twitter, he's getting ready to, I don't know, do a simple thing, have a baby. So
Right.
he's gonna be stepping out from the last couple episodes, but it's awesome that he we had a bunch of fun having him on the show. And trust me, as the Beyond the Clickers keeps returning, as more seasons and more Tilo content comes out, I know he'll be definitely be coming along with us. So
For
Brett,
sure.
have fun with the family. You've earned it, more than earned it, deserve it. We have a great show for you guys today. As usual, we start with a couple of news or interesting articles that we found in the webs that came out throughout the week. Um, we also then jump into the episode. We focus on the things that were show centric, what make the episode its own thing to live out and evolve beyond the video game, but also makes it a phenomenal show. And at the end, as always, we will never forget our fellow gamers out there. We talk Easter eggs, we name each and every one. And this entire episode, I mean, one could say that Easter egg heavy, number two, number one, number two, number five, but number two was the most one. This whole episode is a freaking Easter egg. Like, I
Yeah.
think that's the best way to describe episode seven, Left Behind. And we got a lot to talk about, but let's start with the news. We found two different articles that are very interesting. Um, and this one is directly taking a quote from the conversation that Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann had with Troy Baker on the HBO podcast that they have for The Last of Us. And I figure it was very important to point this out because it I remember when we were talking with Steve Lauder for Moon Girl, he talked a lot about the team doing their homework
Mhm.
to bring these characters to life. And this is just one of those things about the world of 2003, which remember, in the game, there wasn't really a timestamp of when it happened. One could assume that it took place in 2013, but socially speaking, in the show, everything started in 2003, and the social climate, the zeitgeist, the way society worked and viewed a lot of things, especially the LGBTQ plus community, was very different. It has changed dramatically in the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And I find it very interesting that the creators of The Last of Us, and very brilliant, very thoughtful, and something that we need, right, in our society nowadays, that they took the time to show how much we've grown as a society, but also how society's growth pretty much stopped with the outbreak in many different ways, not just in people's livelihoods and lives, but also any type of evolution beyond of what the social norms were. So in this article, I believe it's from Screen Rant,
Mhm.
um, the author talks about, I'm going to read a quote here because it talks about how the timeline changes Ellie and Riley's relationship from the game. And I really wanted to play Left Behind before we jumped into this again, but I remember it quite often. And they were pretty much friends, and they were a lot. You can tell that Ellie and Riley, I believe, are a lot more comfortable with each other in the game. And there is a lot of comfort that you can see because they're friends, but the level of tension between them, because of the feelings that we discover they have for each other as the episode develops, the tension's a lot greater. And I
Yeah.
find it interesting that there is an actual social reason for this. And I'm going to read the quote from the article that bleeds indirectly to correct Mason's quote. Mason reminds everyone that the show's world stops in 2003, thus preceding the revolution that we have gone through as a culture to become accepting of homosexuality. For Riley and Ellie, this means that their young teen crush jitters are coupled with being afraid of their own sexuality. And now I'm going to proceed to read the quote from Craig Mazin. Their sexuality is scary to them and confusing to them because the world, to remind everybody in our show, stops in 2003. The revolution that we've gone through as a culture to become accepting of homosexuality and whatever we will call non heteronormative sexualities hasn't occurred, which means if the world stops in 2003, it just doesn't happen. In this world, that stuff is still problematic, as they say. Still problematic, as they say. So you have these two girls who are uncomfortable with and afraid of their own sexuality. Um, Reading this quote, looking at this article, what are your thoughts? Because I know how important representation is for you, for us in different areas of society. When you read this quote, what were your thoughts, Mike?
It's everything I love about how Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann have approached this series, right? They're using this as an opportunity to shed light on something that was an issue. As somebody who was born in 97, 2003, I was like 6 years old. So this entire time period is a blur to me. So that's something upon first watch, I don't even think about or consider.
Right.
And that's why I love, what we do in this job, talking to creatives, giving them that opportunity to explain their point of view and their perspective on the stories that they're telling, because that adds a whole new layer of context and subtext to this story. That adds, again, even more layers to Bill and Frank's story 4 episodes ago, keeping that in mind, right? So that to me is very important, especially when it comes to a representation factor, because the original Left Behind DLC, when we played that back in 2013, yeah, the original games were set in present day, so they were set in 2013. So seeing that relationship, like you were saying, Brandon, between Riley and Ellie was normal. It didn't feel out of place. It didn't feel strange. Setting it in a different time period only helps, I think, younger audiences and people in that community be more comfortable and realize it's okay to be who you are, to accept who you are. It's more of an uplifting message as opposed to this just, a societal norm now, which I think is a fascinating way to approach it. So for me, that again just highlights one of the biggest strengths of the writer's room of The Last of Us, because they're taking every aspect of the story into consideration, even to the point where us fans may have not even thought about that.
And what I find interesting also about this particular part of the conversation, right, is that when you think about the idea that the world stopped, social growth stopped, it makes you think that when you think about the civil rights movement, when you think about women trying to get the right to work, trying to get the right to vote, the civil rights movement with African Americans and the whole thing with African Americans in the United States.
Yeah.
Think about the idea that for that to happen, so society had to evolve to a certain point just for that even to be considered a possibility. And even then, they were struggling, and it was a fight. It was a big fight that they had to go through for years. And even now, they're still facing hurdles. So the idea that because of an outbreak, you lose all that progress to a degree.
Yeah.
Where certain things are still an issue for most people because of their worldview. Like the idea that society can regress due to traumatic moments like this. It makes you think what happens when wars occur and stuff like that. It also shows it's a social commentary,
right,
in its
exactly.
purest form, and it makes me think also in the pandemic, how many things got rolled back because the world stopped in a way,
Yeah.
and I love that the show is allowing us to have those conversations.
Yeah.
But they're not doing it in a way where it feels preachy. They're just letting you know, hey, we're acknowledging the fact that this is the way the world was, and this how it affects the people growing in that world. Which is why we want to create a better world, right? But yeah, I found that super interesting, and I think it was very well put out there, very well expressed. Um, we got one more article, and this one I found very interesting
Yes.
because not only because it's it's a great article by the writer is oh wait, of course, because I have to go to a different place, right? It was written by IGN's Matt Purslow.
We're gonna take
And
this down because that kind of spoils a thing that
oh,
folks may not know, but we're gonna take that down. We're good.
okay, fair enough. It is down, ladies and gentlemen. I did not see that. That was the wrong snippet, right? But this article by IGN, right?
Mhm.
It's he's breaking down the idea that some adaptations, some live action adaptations, it celebrates The Last of Us, of course. Everybody's celebrating The Last of Us, not just because it's a phenomenal TV show, but also they're celebrating because it is the quintessential live action adaptation. It is checking all the boxes, but it's also exceeding all expectations, which you can have shows that will do one thing but not do the other. The
Right.
Last of Us is doing both and beyond. And it's setting new trends for shows in general because it's also breaking records in that aspect. So not only is it checking out boxes in the video game adaptation front, it's checking boxes in the TV show front and in the medium as a whole. And even within HBO, which again, that by itself is Steve Buscemi numbers. But but what I found interesting about the arguments in this particular article is that Purslow argues that one of the things that allowed The Last of Us to be such a phenomenal piece of art to adapt is how great the source material was, how great the characters were already constructed, how great the scripts were, like how the game focused so much on the story and developing these characters as actual people. That was the groundwork for the TV show. Of course, in other hands, also we got to think about the fact that Craig Mazin plays a big role because he's a brilliant showrunner as well. But
Yeah.
the idea that I go back to that quote from Craig where he always says that he cheated. They asked him, "How do you make the best video game adaptation?" You cheat. You pick up the game with the greatest story ever told. But at the same time, I love how he argues that when compared to Uncharted, which is a movie that we got, what, 2 years ago or a year and a half ago?
I think it wasn't Uncharted just last year.
I think so. It was early last year or something like that.
But yeah, it's 2022.
Yeah. So Uncharted, instead of focusing on what he calls the Druckmann era, which is 2014 onward, probably,
Mm-hmm.
where Naughty Dog took a step forward into digging into these characters. Well, 2013 because The Last of Us was that first work, but that's when The Last was released. They went back to the old adventures of Nathan Drake within the first three games, and he makes this argument that the games are great, the characters are good, but the characters are not there to be defined as people. They're not deep enough to be able to survive in a different medium, which I think is a very interesting point because I think that's what all of us have always said about The Last of Us. It's one of those games that the characters are complex, real, deep enough. The story beats are complex, real, and deep enough that they survive the
Mm-hmm.
adaptation process. And the idea that the Uncharted film was very unsuccessful in those aspects speaks to the fact that they picked the wrong games to do it from. And because when he talks about Uncharted 4, they give Uncharted the Last of Us treatment. And for us that have played A
Right.
Thief's End, we can attest to the fact that that is the best Uncharted story. You can pick Uncharted 2 as your favorite. A lot of people still do because the set pieces of Uncharted 2 are legendary. But the story of Uncharted 4 is something else.
Uncharted 4, I don't think people realize how much heavy lifting that game does for the entire Uncharted franchise. Right? If it ended with Uncharted 3, And don't get me wrong, I like Uncharted is one of my favorite video game franchises of all time. I love every single one of those games. But yeah, if we're going from a story point of view, Uncharted 4, you're right, gets the Last of Us treatment from the way that they switch perspectives, from the way that they tell it in a chapter like format, from the way they just handle the characters. It really reinforces what we love about the Uncharted franchise. I don't think it necessarily like radically changes it, because like it's still Naughty Dog. The groundwork was there. It just evolved. Like once they made The Last of Us, they were able to say, okay, how do we apply what we learned from Tilo and apply it to Nathan Drake and friends over here? And so yeah, it's a very fascinating conversation, especially looking at the Uncharted movie, because it feels like it is built from a different era. It feels like it belongs in 2005 next to Tomb Raider and
the Tomb Raider movies.
Right.
So, yes.
And that's not even me saying that the movie's bad. It doesn't fit today's standards, essentially. And it doesn't even feel like the Uncharted franchise, because you have to remember, we had Uncharted 4, A Thief's End, and then we had Lost Legacy, which is a spin-off game. It was going to be DLC, but it's a spin-off game on its own, a standalone project. And that went a step further. And some may argue it's even better than A Thief's End when you really look at the characters and the story that they're tackling there with Chloe and Nadine. So yeah, it's cool to see the evolution of Naughty Dog as a studio, and then seeing that in turn be an evolution of video game adaptations. I still can't believe we had Uncharted just last year, and then we get The Last of Us. It makes me really angry as an Uncharted fan.
Because they come from the same studio, so you question yourself.
Yeah.
Why?
I have no idea what happened. Like, it could have just been Indiana Jones-esque. You know, it could have just been a fun adventure movie, and instead it's kind of a slog. But I digress. Back to Tilo.
No, and it's funny because I feel that me and Mr. Perslow at IGN are kindred spirits, because he talks about this with IGN, with Naughty Dog. And I did the same thing for DC at Revenge of the Fans, when I did my whole series about why aren't we taking notes from the animated movies when we do these adaptations, because these animated movies are phenomenal. They're doing the characters justice. And we have that right there. The material is there. Like, I'm not even telling you pick up a comic book and adapt it. There's actual films just done in animation, but that do all the beats that would tell a great story with these characters. And it goes down to the ideas. If you're picking up the material from the right sources, the possibilities of you being yourself are a lot higher. It can still be really bad, but it can be a lot higher. And we're not trying to say that Naughty Dog is the only studio that has phenomenal storytelling. Not at all. But
I mean, you may not be the one trying to say that. I, on the other hand, will say, for the video feed, everybody watching, if you're listening to the podcast feed, go to YouTube. Look at Brandon's background. That doesn't exist without Naughty Dog, without The Last of Us, without Uncharted.
Fair, but you have Sucker Punch that delivered Ghost of Tsushima. You have Santa Monica Studios that delivered God of War. You know what I mean? Different type of game, but Insomniac with the Spider-Man games and Ratchet and Clank. So we have plenty of studios that have done justice to these characters and have done great ways, which is why, for example, we all know that it was announced that Amazon is doing God of War. So and that they've made it official that they're using 2018's God of War as the point of origin for the story, or at least that's what they're trying to do, which, again, the right source material, because if you go back to the original God of War games, it's the same kind of scenario as the original Uncharted games. Those are not the ones that you adapt in this day and age. But I don't know, I found it super interesting. And I'm glad that people are doing these analyses and these conversations are being had, because again, it's not just about I mean, anybody would want to do it, right? But it's not just about The Last of Us being the greatest adaptation of all time, which so far it is. But if we can crack that code, these are the kind of conversations okay, people are seeing the code being cracked, which gets me very excited. And I'm hoping that we keep seeing awesome adaptations.
It makes me excited because I want everybody to remember what Prime Video is known for, right? Like we just covered The Legend of Vox Machina,
So good.
Invincible, The Boys, and so if we're getting all, there's plenty of other shows I'm not naming, but I'm just speaking of what we've covered here on the channel.
Yep.
Those are all masterpieces in my opinion, and that's not me being hyperbolic. Like those are legitimate masterpiece storytelling. So if they adapt 2018, which again is more masterclass storytelling,
yes,
beautiful. Ghost of Tsushima getting a movie, that'll be amazing. I think adapting newer age video games is kind of the way to go. The Mario movie looks great, but I think it's time to move past the era of the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s for some of these, because just gameplay wise, story wise, there's not a lot of story there with those properties. And I think that was kind of the problem. The Mario movie was always going to be bad. Live action Mario was probably always going to be bad.
Yes.
Mario's not built for that. And so
correct. Which is why this new Mario movie looks like it's going to be amazing. Because it's also not just picking the right source, right, material. It's also about understanding the audience for it. Right. Because they were trying to do this take on Mario that would be appealing. But as one of the greatest Super Mario fans in the world would say, my cousin Mario Francisco Robles, they killed Toad. They set Toad on fire. And he was crying in the movie. I know. It's like
that's so bad.
That's so bad. Like the right source, the right audience, the right vision.
Yeah.
I can't wait for, by the way, this has nothing to do with The Last of Us, but I'm excited that the Mario movie is coming out earlier now.
Yeah.
That's super cool. I can't wait. That's a day one for me if I can. But
we're definitely covering it, you guys. Don't worry. We're going to be doing the Mario.
You heard me, Isaac? But guys, it's time. Let's jump into the episode.
Yeah.
Let's talk The Last of Us DLC. Oh, wait. We're talking about the movie. We're talking about the show. Left Behind. So there's a lot to talk about. And I think before we jump into the episode, I'm just going to do a quick side note here. For those that have played the game, you know how the DLC goes. But those that have not played the game, I'm going to break it down for you. Ellie, if I remember correctly, I may be wrong. Mike, correct me.
I got you.
Ellie and Joel are low on supplies, so Ellie has to go find supplies. But as she starts looking for supplies, she runs into some raiders in a nearby mall, close to the neighborhood where she's taking care of Joel as he's recovering from his wounds. And throughout this, the flashbacks occur. And that's where you get the story of Left Behind of Ellie and Riley. And and that's how they connect it to modern day. In the show, they connect it to modern day, but there's no raiders. But this is so much, it's more powerful. It's heartbreaking. It took me by surprise. Like, part of me, I don't know, it's because the game has trained me with the way it does cliffhangers and the fact that the TV show low-key has done some of the video game cliffhangers, like to a T. So it kind of played with my perspective, but I was kind of expecting it to be like in the game, because in the game, when Joel falls off the horse, similar to the end of episode 6, Joel falls off the horse. Ellie's desperate. I don't know what to do. Screen goes to black. And suddenly you're in the forest. There's a bunny rabbit. It's pierced by an arrow. And you find Ellie on her own. And she's hunting.
Yes.
And you spend almost 10 minutes trying to hunt a deer, and you have no idea what happened to Joel. The show didn't do that. The show gives you a shot of the neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you see snow and horse tracks. You see blood in the snow. You go into the room inside this house. You see a jacket or a blanket filled with blood. You see the horse, which, by the way, I know you guys remember Callus. You got to remember Callus.
Such a
And
good horse.
yes. And we find Joel there, still bleeding out, and Ellie trying to figure out what to do. When you saw this shift, as soon as the episode starts, was I the only one caught by surprise?
You might not be the only one caught by surprise. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the online discourse with this episode. This is the most divisive one we've gotten so far.
The most what?
Divisive episode we've gotten
Interesting.
so far out of all of them. Mainly because there is a surprisingly big amount of people who have not played the Left Behind DLC, which I think is fascinating.
Interesting.
And so this, I'm going to just use their words. They consider this episode filler because, you know, we left this insane cliffhanger. And I think the episode's detriment may have been not doing what the game did, right? Not having that suspense of, oh my God, what happened to Joel? By continuing that plot line of Joel is injured, Ellie needs to figure out what to do, and then randomly going into the flashback, I think may have did a little more harm for people who didn't know what was going to happen with the Left Behind stuff. For me personally, though, again, I had screeners for this. I didn't get the next time on type of thing, so I had no idea.
Next time on Dragon Ball Z.
Exactly. I had no idea what any of the episodes were going to be about until I just played the next one. So I didn't even know we were doing Left Behind at all. I didn't know how they were going to tackle it. Because for those who remember, Left Behind is downloadable content. So that is a story that you can place into the timeline, but you don't necessarily see it happen this way in the actual game. So I didn't even know we were going to do Left Behind. So that to me was by itself the big shocking reveal of, oh my gosh, we're doing Left Behind this episode. This is amazing. But I can see for a lot of people by not, doing what the game did, by maybe hinting that Joel is gone and Ellie's been alone, by making it pick up instantly, they kind of felt disconnected from those flashbacks.
So let me ask you this. Do you think so because we didn't build on the suspense that the game does, a lot of people feel upset that we lost some tension?
We lost some tension, but also in the grand scheme of everything that's happening in the story of The Last of Us, nothing really changes at all in this episode. The status quo is still Joel is bleeding out. Ellie needs to figure out what to do. And by the end of it, Ellie closes the wound, but Joel is still severely injured and she's trying to figure out what to do. I think that's part of the issue of, if half the episode we don't realize Joel is alive and if he's going to make it, that may have helped add tension and add agency to those flashbacks in a way where people are just like, I just want to know what happens to Pedro Pascal, man.
So,
which I think is fascinating.
I find it fascinating that a lot of people feel like that, because to me, what I enjoyed the most about this episode was that it's the first time we're alone with Ellie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I know that in the game, you do have that moment alone with Ellie, right? Which we're going to get, which I like the fact that we're still going to get that, because we did see the previews for episode 8.
I have not. I'm taking your word for it.
Okay, we have seen the previews for episode 8 where they're going to carry on the story as is in the game. No spoilers. We're going to get all I'm going to say is we're going to get that one character that becomes a big figure in Ellie's life. Those that know. And
I get you.
I like what I like about this episode is that I like the fact that we were able to spend time with Ellie, because we did get time with Joel prior to the outbreak. You know what I mean? We did get time with Joel. We did get time, and we've been with Joel and Ellie forever. So the fact that we got time with Ellie now, and the way the show has been constructed thus far, if we were going to show this episode, if we were going to show this content, that it is substantial for the decisions that Ellie makes. Because that's the whole thing. For the growth of Ellie as a character, there's no other place to do it. Especially if Craig and Neil are going to stick to their guns into not doing any more content outside of the games. You know what I mean? It's not like we're going to get a season 2 that's going to be the in-between part 1 and 2. That's not their goal. Like, there was no other real place where you can put this in. So I do like the fact that it happened here. But more importantly, I like how it informs what Ellie does and why Ellie is the way she is with people. And not only that, it gives us an insight into Ellie's emotional background that explains the conversation that they both had in episode 6.
Mm-hmm.
Because we don't know where that comes from Ellie's point of view. It makes sense because of what we've seen, but we don't know the depths of what's inside Ellie's mind and heart as we know what's inside Joel's. We just saw him tear his heart out in front of his brother.
Yeah.
So we know where he's at.
And the show built up that moment by everything we did see in episode 1 and everything with Tess moving forward.
Right.
And I think, again, you're right. I don't know where else you can put the Ellie flashback, essentially, is what this episode is.
Yeah.
But I can see both sides of it. For me personally,
I do too.
It doesn't bother me. But yeah, I can totally see where it's like, yeah, you just had our main character get impaled and he's been bleeding out for an episode and we still have made no progress with that. I totally get that. From the content of this episode, though, I loved everything we did with Ellie. And I think Bella Ramsey really showed.
This is her episode. Like
this. Yeah, she showed why she was cast as Ellie Williams in this one. Her chemistry with Riley, I thought was fantastic.
Storm Reed was phenomenal.
She was so good in this episode. And we say that with every guest star. Like they show up for an episode or two and they just kill it, right? Storm Reed was fantastic. I really love, we were saying earlier that their relationship is slightly different than it was in the game. I've really, really enjoyed their dynamic in this one. And there was a lot of stuff we learned from this episode just about the world, right? What was it like for Ellie in Boston? What is it like for a child growing up in this post-apocalyptic world? Because again, we start the story from Joel's perspective. He lived a normal life. I mean, he was a little stressed. He worked a lot, you know. He wasn't the greatest dad, but by and large, he forgot the cake, which is probably for the best because flour. But you know, he had a decent life, and I think that by itself is taking a toll on him too, right? Like, the simple pleasures of coffee are now one of the biggest delights he can possibly get because the world has gone down the toilet that far. Ellie, on the flip side of that coin, though, has never experienced what normal life was. And so, one, I think it's interesting, us, the viewer, discovering more about how the world has changed in the last 20 years. But two, seeing Ellie just be a kid for a few minutes, like her amazement of an escalator was, and the way that Bella was able to capture that childlike wonder and joy was wonderful. Was insane. I didn't even know you had this slide, but good job.
By the way, I love how she low-key is doing the Naruto run.
Yes.
Low-key. I mean,
does Naruto even exist in this universe?
I don't think so. I think Naruto is like the 2006. Let's find out.
We're going to do that. Naruto. When did you come out, buddy? 1999.
19.
Naruto
Okay, so there
exists.
was. I mean, we never. Hey, probably for the best. It probably ended before Shippuden.
I don't know. Like, okay, so if this is 2003, we didn't even get Sasuke back. That's where the shit. That's where it ends. That's messed up. Anyway, leaving that alone. This
Yes.
scene is amazing. I
Yes.
love seeing the childlike wonder in her eyes, and it makes you sad when you realize what things transpire in the next couple weeks for her.
This shot right here, though.
Yes.
This shot. Did you know that this is all VFX?
No, I didn't.
Yes. That is all VFX.
Wow.
Like the mall that they had was like a one-story mall,
Mhm.
apparently, according to the HBO podcast, and it had like a second floor, but it wasn't great. But this shot is pretty much VFX, and it looks amazing.
There is a lot of incredible VFX moments that are coming up. I know I saw the unrendered versions of it, but I know what they're going to be representing and alluding to, and I can't wait for you guys to see them because these next episodes are going to be great.
Can't wait. I cannot wait. I love everything with this episode. I love the way it starts. One of the things that surprised me the most, before I give my thoughts on the whole Left Behind stuff, is the moment that we get with Joel just being there bleeding out and Ellie not knowing what to do. When Joel shoves her and says, "You go," like Joe is literally pleading to her to leave him to die. Like that broke me, bro. That was like that. I don't like go north, go to Tommy's. Like I'm done. Like, and the funny thing is, we just heard him say that this was his biggest fear, that he would get them killed.
Yeah.
And now he's and the idea that Ellie literally leaves, and the idea that the whole flashback is what informs her split-second decision to not give up.
Yes.
Because here's the thing, though, which I think it's another fascinating aspect of Ellie's character that without Riley, we don't explore. Ellie's an orphan.
Yep.
We've heard it. We heard that she's an orphan. But we never really understand how that affects who she is. She's angry at the world. She has a lot less sensibility to certain things. The way she values things is differently. But on the other side, Riley knew her family. Riley lost her parents.
Yeah.
So on one side, when they find a dead body, when the dead body falls, Ellie's just seeing it like another thrill, but Riley's just taking it in. You know what I mean? Like Riley has this value for life and the world. And of course, the whole thing about Riley being older also, which I think that was a very smart decision, which wasn't a thing, I believe, in the game, because they were pretty much the same age in the game.
Right.
The fact that she's older also adds another dimension, because I love the idea of Riley trying to be the adult, but Ellie is still this I know everything attitude. But
she's still Ellie.
She's still exactly. She's still Ellie, and I love how that's explored throughout. Until we get to the end of the episode where Riley does the speech, which is directly from the game, where it's like, option one, we take the easy way out, which, by the way, a great callback to the idea that committing suicide is the easy way, which the show hasn't really expressed it or shown it. The game kind of like touches upon it, right? But doesn't really go into it. And then she goes, "No, I don't like that option." Option two is we keep going. And Ellie goes, but it's over. And she goes, no, it might be 2 minutes. We don't know. We maybe just be all poetic and just go crazy together. The idea that there's nothing more valuable than enjoying every single moment that you can with the people that you love. You don't give up on family, which again connects to the love message, to the tissue, and goes back to the conversation that for the longest time, what did Joel say? You're not family. You're cargo.
Mm-hmm.
But after the father-daughter montage in episode 6,
And
right?
don't forget that 3 months later, before that even
Right.
happens,
Right. Like things have gotten to the point where this is what this is. This
Mhm.
is, they recognize their roles in this now. And they're better for it with each other, right?
Yeah.
In whichever, I mean, people can think differently as we move on, but they're better for it. And now they get to this point, and that's why Ellie tries to find what she finds, and she goes to suture the wound. And I love how they found a way to tie the message. I love that the focus of Left Behind wasn't just the exploration, wasn't just to talk about the bite. Like, because you could have been careless and make it about, oh, let's just find out how she got bitten.
Yeah.
Because in reality, nobody really cares how she got bit. Because we know what happens. You know, when you really think about it, we don't care to see how she got bit. We already know that she gets bit, and we know that she survives.
I think that's why, again, for some people, this did feel like a filler because they're looking at it answering that question of this is how Ellie got infected. And I think just the way we process stories, like we have a freaking podcast analyzing The Last of Us. We're
Yes,
built
we
a
do.
little bit different from from the general audience.
Seek through art.
Right.
Clickers.
But yeah, exactly. The title of the show, Beyond the Clickers, going past the initial infection here, seeing the greater themes of the story. You're right. The idea and the themes of love and the dangers that actually holds are still present here. Because think about it. Riley didn't have to do this for Ellie. She could have just said, hey, I'm leaving tomorrow. And they just hung out in Ellie's room and called it, and be over. But her love for Ellie leads to chaos unknowingly. Like, it's not like she intended for any of this to happen, but that's just, again, the theme of love will make you do some crazy things, and the consequences of that may not always be kind.
Right.
Also, 80s still mean trouble, so that was probably our first our first key.
And it plays Take on Me.
It plays Take on Me, and when they're on the carousel, it plays Just
Cure.
Like Heaven by The Cure.
Yo, I didn't catch that. That is so meta.
Yeah.
How did you not like this episode? No, not you. I'm just talking to the world.
I know, right?
I respect everybody's opinion, but oh my God, I didn't catch that, bro. I did not.
Yeah. For those of you who want more Easter eggs, go to collider.com. That's a shameless plug. They're all there.
Shameless. Good.
But yeah.
But shameless.
80 still means trouble. So by having Take on Me play, I was saying this to Christian and Devin on the Film Optics podcast. We reviewed this episode yesterday.
Nice.
Neil Druckmann has taken one of my favorite songs and Take on Me, has used it and weaponized it against me for like 6 years now, and I hate him for it.
Well, and the thing is this, like I was watching the episode, a little bit of the episode at work, and my coworker, which is now a super fan of the show, never played the game, and he's been amazed with everything and enjoyed pretty much every episode.
Nice.
I pretty much kind of dropped the hint, like, yeah, Take on Me is a big song because they're setting the stage for something in the future, which I think it's brilliant. You know what I mean? And like the way they've used music to unite all the lore and everything. It's been phenomenal. And
Did you notice? Not only did the song play, you saw that she had the cassette on her desk.
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah.
So it's like
She's listening to Pearl Jam. She has Aha. She had a couple of the cassettes there. Yeah, and Riley stole all of them because, of course, she's a thief. That was the best line. I love how you mentioned about. I want to go back a little bit about what you mentioned about the show focusing on the main things, on the main themes, and that's why I think this episode is so strong, because it's one of those bait and switch moments. Like, you come for this, but the real reason why we brought you here was for this. That's why you're here.
It's a coming of age story.
Yes.
In the middle of the zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
That's something only The Last of Us can really get away with.
Yeah, it's another type of episode 3 scenario.
Yeah.
Where they're literally showing us the world through these characters and how the world has affected them and how they've reacted to the world. But I love the fact that we really and also we're answering so many questions, right? Because she's killed one before. I had a friend that I played this game with, and she talks about Milena's fatality, which, by the way, I love that. Of course, just like in the game, we get the cabinet. It's Mortal Kombat. I find it, Warner Brothers has a good relationship with NetherRealm, I would assume, because they do the Injustice games and stuff like that. So that was pretty easy. But I like that they grounded it so they can actually use games that we know.
Yeah.
Little tidbit that I found interesting that Neil mentioned. Did you know that in the game they play a different game called The Turning?
Right.
Did you know that when he was originally working on the first drafts for The Last of Us to be a book, the book was called The Turning?
Yep. That's insane. Devin actually mentioned that on the Film Optics podcast.
Yeah, that was one of the things that blew my mind, bro.
It blew my mind, and I'm just like, that's fascinating. It's interesting that they went with Mortal Kombat. This is just small details. It's interesting that they went with Mortal Kombat for the video game segment, but they made a point to keep Savage Starlight for the comic book. So it's like they kept one of their original creations,
yes,
as opposed to just going with Superman. Because, again, this is a Warner Brothers produced show. They could have pulled anything from the DC cabinet.
Yes.
And they chose not to.
And it's because Savage Starlight influences some of the themes that drive Ellie.
Beware My Power probably could still apply to Ellie. Who knows?
With her switchblade.
Yes.
Man, that switchblade can do anything.
It's like a kunai.
Yeah.
Kunais are undefeated.
Now I want to go there. There's a spin a kunai. We're kind of going to mix and match the whole spoilers thing, the whole Easter eggs thing, because the whole episode is a spoiler. Mm-hmm. But I love the whole setting of the 5 wonders of the mall. I love the shot of the mall coming to life. That was just beautiful.
Can we go back to that shot right quick if we could?
Yeah.
In the mall. This is 100% The Last of Us. What I mean by that, this is a gorgeous shot. But look at the chaos. Look at the plants growing through the ceiling. Look at the glass shattered on the ground.
Yep.
It's beauty, but also it's just destroyed. It's utterly destroyed. And that's basically T-Lou in a nutshell, where you can find something wholesome and wonderful in that story, in the chaos. It's great shot composition. I love it.
And I love the whole, yes, it has fillerish things, but I love the whole explanation. Like when Riley talks about, well, my mom told me that when the outbreak occurred, people started looting, taking what they need, and what they didn't need, they left. Oh, and then he goes, oh, so sneakers and not soap. Like, I love that. That's one of. Oh, by the way, I love the fact that we have like a Best Buy emblem all the way in the back, like in the background. One of the shots that was hilarious.
I love just the bit of the Victoria's Secret when they walked by it. I have to give it to Riley, dropping really subtle hints. Like, I
Yes,
was imagining you in that.
they're
It's like,
both doing it. I love how they're both doing it, right? And like
yeah,
none of them are. It's very teenagery, right? They're both dropping hints because Riley drops hints verbally and the way she approaches Ellie, so she's more physical about it in a way.
yep,
But Ellie does it by questioning, by wanting to understand, which again is two different type of people, but they're kind of like hinting at the same thing. And so we got the fifth. It used to be four wonders, but of course, Ellie dubbed the escalator the fifth wonder of them all.
I've got an
Right?
extra wonder, by the way.
Which one?
If I can pull this up, I'm going to share my screen. The sixth wonder is the Naughty Dog logo on the keychain.
Yo, that's a deep cut. Yo, if there ever was a deep cut, that's a deep cut.
So sneaky. So, like, why does the camera just hold on dude's keys for no reason at the beginning of the episode? It's like, oh, that's why.
Damn it, Neil. That's okay. I give it to you.
We can continue.
So now I love the conversation of self-esteem
Mhm.
and the idea of like the little nuances, and Riley was a phenomenal performer in this piece. But I love how Bella Ramsey continues to amaze me with her nuanced performance.
Yes.
Like that little shot of her after Riley drops the hint and the joke, oh, I was imagining you in there. And she stops for a minute. Because here's the thing, though. You see her as, of course, she's an asshole, which, I mean, that's just who she is. You can say she's a brat, she's a teenager. But for the first time, we're seeing her as a teenage girl. Like for that moment, for that instant. I mean, there's you know what I mean? Like there's a sensibility to that moment where she feels the need to look how she looks, straighten her hair, and those little details to me were like are the things that make Bella shine, because she's done this throughout the entire series, and this one in particular really stood out to me. It was great.
It goes back to we were talking about what Craig Mazin was saying about their sexuality, and again, like me mentioning, this is a coming of age story. This is Ellie finding who she is. It ends in tragic circumstances, but still, like it's a coming of age tale wrapped in a zombie apocalypse story. So that just highlights it. I wasn't here for the last couple episodes, but yeah, the nuance is one of my favorite things about this show. I think Rin and I, in our coverage before the show dropped, we're talking about Pedro Pascal's and Bella Ramsey's performances. Just going back to last week, seeing Joel break down, right? And like hearing his voice, the tremble in his voice, his panic attacks, I think just add layers that the game couldn't accomplish.
Yes.
And it's a completely different medium than video games because, again, they have to immerse you in it in a way where you are Joel, essentially.
Yes.
So I think it's really fascinating seeing Joel the last two episodes and then Ellie in this one getting into their head and trying to figure out who they are as people. I think for me is one of the biggest strengths of this adaptation, because it's tackling an idea that, as much as I love The Last of Us, they just could never accomplish in video games.
Yeah, and the idea that in this little moment, in this 40-minute span that we get with Riley and Ellie in the mall, Ellie knows how she feels about Riley. And it's like she's accepting who she is as she's recognizing, as she's putting into action how she feels. Mm-hmm. It's a way of, again, coming of age, finding herself. And I love that we see that as they explore all the wonders, the carousel. So what a beauty. This shot is so beautiful.
Yes.
Like the lighting, the great mixture of lighting and darkness. Look for the light. I loved it a lot. Something interesting.
The CVS is falling apart in this shot.
The what?
The CVS is falling apart in the left corner. Here, you pull it up. We keep knocking each other
I'm
out.
sorry. I'm sorry. Oh, I see it. I mean, CVS is doing the same thing all over. But I do find it interesting that in the game,
Yeah.
they know a guy that lives in the mall. I like the fact that they made the smart choice to edit it out. And also, the one thing that makes it interesting and viable is that Riley's older. So that would make sense that probably she's more capable than 14-year-old Riley would be.
Yeah.
Right. So those are the little things that I enjoyed. We get the photo booth, which again, great moment, taken straight out of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So awesome. I love the whole thing with the bunny. Like, you can't do it for free. Like the little voices and stuff like that.
I love how angry Ellie gets. It's just like, calm down. It's okay. She's got it. You didn't even give her a second.
Exactly. And then we have the most
great.
beautiful thing that anybody has ever seen. Were you an arcade junkie, Mike?
No. Again, 2003-ish era, I was playing PS1, PS2 video
At
games.
home, right? I was never, but that's the thing. I was never an arcade. Like whenever I would go somewhere and there was a cabinet, buddy, I wanted to play.
Right.
But it was because of the amazement that I don't have to be home to play it because I've always had consoles.
Right.
So even to me, this was like, I don't know. I was just curious. Like probably that was for the older crowd or stuff like that. But
it's probably like a decade and a half before me. Arcades were really a thing. For me, again, looking at this arcade though, I would have a ball here. None of my arcades had Mortal Kombat. Like I would be there every single day if my arcades actually had. I had like Miss Pac-Man and stuff at mine, which was
that's what happens when you go to Chuck E. Cheese's, or like Dave Chappelle would say, Charles Edward Cheese.
Charles Cheese. That's hilarious. But yeah, like cut. Arcades, they weren't a big thing here. I was playing Jack and Daxter. You're welcome, Naughty Dog.
So whether you like it or not, you're playing Naughty Dog games. So going to the fourth. Now I do love the very amazing decision to not have a horde of infected, because in the game everything goes to, quote unquote shit because of the horde of infected that come to hunt down Ellie and Riley. But in the show, it's not a horde of infected. It's just one.
I love this change.
And I love how it tells you it only takes one. And I love the fact that it's an armored infected because it's a different variant of infected. You know what I mean? This was an infected that was on its way to just die. To be similar to the infected that we saw in episode 1.
In the wall, yeah.
In the wall, right? This one was about to become that. But life showed up and the fungus just reactivated that corpse, right? Pretty much. And I like the fact that the reason that the shots that because we know that when Riley fired, she landed a couple of shots.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the fungal growth, similar to what we saw in episode 5 with the bloater, that none of the bullets pretty much did anything, is because of the fungal growth. It pretty much becomes Kevlar. So I love the variance. I love the creativity. And I love the fact that these two were able to take him down, but at a cost. So I think that was a great decision that they made.
I love it simply because we haven't really had hordes of infected in this show at all, aside from episode 5, right? I would
The end
say.
of 2 and 5.
Yeah. So I think it makes sense because one, the show has already confirmed that Ellie has never seen a clicker.
Yes.
Two, it just adds a bigger sense of agency and urgency to the story because as trained as Riley is, and even Ellie, she understands how to take down someone who's infected. But they still aren't strong enough. They still don't have the experience enough to defeat it or to run away from it. Because that's the thing. Like she shot, they should have ran. And those are that it just highlights why Marlene needed Joel and Tess to take Ellie. Because not many people can survive this. So it would have been weird if Ellie and Riley were able to take down a horde of infected or survive a horde of infected by making it one and making that one successful, because by all accounts, they both should have died that night.
Yeah.
It just, again, kind of highlights why Joel and Tess were the only ones capable of doing this job. And for me, it kind of makes it a bit stronger in a television sense. In a video game sense, again, different mediums, it'd be really boring if I just had to fight one clicker, one infected every stage, you know?
Right.
So
right.
I think that's, again, just the transition between video game and television.
And something that we talk on anime a lot is the idea of power scaling.
Yes.
And I love how you bring that up with the idea of the physicality that these young girls lack because of their age, and also because, yes, they've been trained by military operatives, stuff like that, but it's not like they're super crazy like other female characters we'll meet in the future. But but I like the idea that it tracks with what happens in episode 5 at the end. That Ellie was in trouble with Sam.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not just the fact that he's a kid, is that because he's frantic, the frantic energy makes him a harder obstacle to overcome. You know what I mean? So
that, and Sam was deaf. And
right.
What does a deaf clicker do? Because they react off of sound. So he was probably frantic because it doesn't know how to control itself or what to do at that point either.
Yep. Yep. I don't know, man. Everything tracks, and I love it. Now,
Yes.
one of the things that I love that it's kind of unique to the episode, because honestly, I do not remember this being a thing in the game, because I don't think we get a lot of time in Fedra School in the game. Like it starts there, but we really don't have a lot of time there. But
it's not fun gameplay wise, so they get us out.
Yes. So it's not just a Mortal Kombat poster. I love that Ellie knew about Will Livingston already. And I love, no pun intended, this otter beacon.
Oh boy.
Yes. Hey, if these books existed, I would get them.
I wouldn't, but I'd send one to Isaac.
So, what did the triangle say to the circle?
What?
You're pointless.
Yep, we're there.
Yes, we're there.
I'm glad that we're just adding Ellie's interests a bit earlier in the story, by having no pun intended, by having her cassette tapes and her love of music. I think that, again, is just building her character in a way that the video games didn't have time to focus on. Yes. So I really enjoy the small details of that.
Right. And that's one of those things, like, it's like, this is one of those episodes that I think its greatest achievement, no matter how you feel about it, because everybody has their own opinion, they have the right to, right? This show teaches you and shows you in a phenomenal way all the things you didn't know that you didn't know about Ellie. It kind of fills up those lore gaps that make her a more complete character. And as someone that has played all of the Last of Us content, it really plays a big role towards where she's going as a character. So I'm glad that it's happening here because we know we're getting more.
It's going to make the moments, and I'm not going to say it, but you guys know it, and you know it, Brandon. It's going to make the moments hit even harder
Yes.
than they probably do in the video game, if I'm being completely honest.
Yeah. Yeah. Because now I think we're at the same level with her now as we are with Joel.
Right.
And I think that's the whole thing. Like, a lot of people, I find it interesting that some people look at Joel as the main character, but I love that this is one of those episodes that tells you, no, this is as much as about Ellie as it is about Joel.
Yeah.
The main characters are these two people, these two forces of nature and how they interact together. So I love the fact that in terms of how much we know about them is now in the level playing field.
I do, because you mentioned that there's only 2 episodes left.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe this should have been episode 3, and you move everything from episode 3 down 1. Because, yeah, Neil Druckmann and Naughty Dog will always tell you that Ellie technically is probably the main character of this franchise.
Yes.
But up to this point,
True.
it has clearly been Joel. It has
True.
all been told from his perspective. So I feel like
True.
introducing it this late in the game is probably their one kind of mistake. Again, you might have to go to the drawing board and reframe the entire series to make it happen earlier. I'm not going to try and rewrite the whole thing, but I don't know, like introducing it this late in the series, and you're still going to try and
could have that drawback with certain audiences. No, it makes sense. It actually makes perfect sense. And I think it's one of those things that it was a creative choice.
Yeah.
But I don't think it takes away from the experience.
No, not at all.
But the points that you're making are very valid. So well done, sir. Now, as we wrap up the episode, right? We get that moment of Ellie recognizing that we don't give up on family. And she's frantic, looking for something, and she finds it. When I noticed that she finds a needle and a string, I was like, wow, they're doing this. Because we don't see this in the game. No. When we find him later, we know that he's been sutured. We know that he has an infection, and we know that she's been taking care of him. But we never saw this. And I love the fact that they were able to frame the flashback within what's going on. And I don't know. I loved it. I think it was a very strong episode. And I can't wait for episode 8 to come out. I'm very excited. I have a feeling that episode 9, which is the last one, is probably going to be a long finale. I have a feeling about that. But more than anything, I am very surprised because being able to tell the whole story of the game, of part 1, including Left Behind, in one season is nothing short than a Herculean task. And the fact that they've done it with this phenomenal pacing, adding things that weren't there before, that enrich the lore and the world, I don't know, man. It's awesome.
This is why, for those who have been watching the channel and looking at all of our Last of Us content, this is why I titled my initial review the best adaptation ever. Because it's like you said, they were able to take the main game and the DLC and blend them together in a mostly seamless fashion to the point where I was second guessing myself, because you're right, the Left Behind DLC does pick up at this point in the story. And so I'm like, was this always the game? Am I misremembering things? Because it was such a natural progression of where things were going for me.
Yeah.
And yeah, like at this point, I want to get a vibe check from you, Brandon, specifically, because there's 2 episodes left.
Yeah.
How are you feeling? Do you think they're going to be able to stick the landing? with what you know is left in the game. This might be mild spoilers for the video game guys and what's coming up in the next two.
For the show audience,
Right.
more than anything.
So, how are you feeling? 2 episodes to go. We know you've loved it this far. Where are you at?
So it's funny. I don't know why, but I go back to this moment.
Mhm.
This moment at the end of this episode.
Please hold my hand.
Right. This is the first time they hold hands like this.
Yes.
I'm not letting you go. This shot is telling us where these characters are with each other. And the fact that this is going to inform the next 2 episodes, I feel it's going to be very hard for them not to stick the landing. They have to do dramatically crazy shit to not stick the landing. Because the fact that we've been able to be with these characters for 7 episodes and we 100% believe how genuine the father-daughter love that they feel for each other and the fact that they're not letting themselves go. This is what needed to happen. Like, I didn't know how much I needed this shot till this moment as I'm looking back to all the episodes, because that shot is the perfect setup for what's to come. So they've done all the legwork.
Yeah.
Like, so I think they do stick the landing because they've built it up to what it, like, they don't need to build anything more. They have everything in place to just deliver.
Mm-hmm.
I am very surprised that there's only 2 episodes left. And I'm very surprised that episode 8 is going to try and do that whole part of the story. But at the same time, with everything that we saw in episode 5, with everything that we saw in episode 3, I don't doubt their ability for doing it.
Yeah.
Like, I have so much faith in them right now that I'm good.
Yeah, that's good. That's good to hear. Want to acknowledge everybody in the live chat. Thank you, Isaac, for stopping by, saying hello, hitting that like button. If you're watching us on the replay, if you listen to us in the podcast feed, give us a like, subscribe. Derpy Entertainment, thank you for joining us in the chat. Yeah, these first 7 episodes were indeed insane. These next 2, the general audience is not ready. They still have no idea what nobody's
ready. Now, we pretty much blended our Easter egg section with the episode, but there's one Easter egg that we never mentioned. So I'm going to do a quick run of the Easter egg so we can head home. And is things that are very particular, but they're all there. Is the way Left Behind starts, Ellie has a black eye. Mm-hmm. She has a black eye. Riley sneaks in, takes her over there. The whole mall, the carousel, the photo booth, Mortal Kombat 2, even though in the game is the turning. Ellie argues with Riley and leaves. The Halloween store. Yeah. I cannot believe how identical that scene is to the game. It's ridiculous how almost identical it is. Oh, by the way, did anybody notice that the clothes that Ellie's wearing is the same one she's wearing when we meet her? Because again,
in my Easter egg article, I also noticed that when we first see Ellie at the beginning of this episode, she's wearing short sleeves. And the reason that's significant is the entire game, the entire show, she's got to hide her bite mark. So she's always wearing long sleeves. So it's interesting how Ellie's wardrobe is always going to be a great indicator of where we are in the timeline.
Yep. And there's another Easter egg, which is a deep cut, but I love the fact that they took the time. They literally took the camera and said, here it is. We got our Dawn of the Wolf Easter egg. Which
wild.
We
I didn't even notice this one.
Which we see the posters. We see the posters all out Pittsburgh during the Hunters arc in the game. But we finally get the poster here next to a movie theater in the mall, which to me was like, bruh, bruh, bruh. And I love how the fact that this one says coming soon, so it's like it never got there.
Oof.
Yeah, so bad. But yeah, that was to me one of the greatest Easter eggs ever. It was so good, so awesome. In the chat, let us know which one of y'all's caught that one. Derpy Entertainment says, especially the scene with Joel in episode 8. I hope they do it justice. Oh, I know what you're saying. I know
Yeah.
exactly what you're talking about.
Oh yeah.
And I'm gonna talk to you, Derpy. And I don't know if anybody's gonna understand this, but I'm gonna say it. Episode 6, the beginning of episode 6, it's kind of a foreshadow to the scene that I think, Derpy, you're referring to. It's
Yeah.
all about the questions. But I don't know, guys. I think we've done the thing. We've talked about articles. We've talked about the episode. We've broken it down. We've talked about the art beyond the clickers. If you love what we do here, like Mike said, make sure to subscribe. Click at that like button. Click on that bell for notifications so you do not miss any single episode of Beyond the Clickers and any other content of the Chatter After. We talk with creators, we interview them, talk about the awesome work that they do. We also cover movies every 2 weeks, and we have the Chatter After Daily where we talk news and a bunch of other stuff that is awesome. And from time to time, who knows, we talk video games as well. We do it all, guys, here at the Chatter After. Join us, join the conversation, join the Chatter. If you want to also find us in a different place, we also are part of the Amateur Taco podcast where we talk anime. We recently have an episode on Tomo-chan is a Girl, which was awesome. What a great anime. It's going to go down this week. It's going to go live on the stream, on the pod. And I'm Brandon. You can find me at Scarlet Fan. You can find Mike at
Novice Cinephile everywhere.
And I'm going to leave you with something very simple.
Before we do, yeah, the David episode, that's going to be an interesting one. We'll get into that one next week.
Yes, that's going to be very interesting. But I'm going to leave you guys with something very simple. But if I don't do this, I will never forgive myself because I've done it for 7 episodes straight now. So I got to keep it up. Guys, I'll leave you with these words. As the great Savage Starlight would say, endure and survive.
Survive.
Have it awesome, guys. Peace.
Until next time.